Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to another Incredible You workshop. Today is a critical workshop for you because everything you've been learning and everything you're going to learn comes down to how you apply it. So, this one is culminating all the things that you've got up here and how to make it work for you. So, the workshop is called How to Maximize Training Outcomes with the Principles of Training. And in terms of exercise, science, clinical nutrition, and sports nutrition, we use a series of principles to get results. And the principle of adaptation is really important because if we don't have a plan and we're not working towards specific stimulus, we won't get results with our bodies. Okay, so we know that exercise training or working on your fitness can provide muscular, cardiovascular, and neurological benefits. Okay, and the body changes and becomes fitter or healthier in response to being exposed to a training stimulus. All right, and that stimulus could be so many things. All right, it could be running up a hill, it could be squatting, it could be doing a plank, it could be dancing, it could be swimming, it could be surfing, it could be anything. Anything that is physical is a stimulus. Okay, but it's only when the body is overloaded with the stimulus that there will be improvements, okay? And there can also be plateaus and declines in your fitness and health when you're not stimulating your body with physical stresses enough. So we're going to go into that today because one thing that I've seen a lot over the years is people are wasting their time with the training that they're doing. Okay, so you will get a lot out of this workshop. Hopefully, have a pen and paper ready to go because there will be some note taking, but at the end, I'm going to go through a principle called the FITT Principle, which you really want to write down, sorry, so that you can use that every time you're planning your training from now on. Okay? So, just keeping in mind that the body needs to be exposed to a stimulus, some physical stimulus of some sort, to be able to work on your training. Okay? So, what is overload? Overload is when the body shows signs of stress. Okay? So, adaptation is when those stress signs begin to reduce, okay? And a plateau is when we're not making any more improvements with the fitness that we're working on. So that we're doing the same run, the same stimulus being applied all the time over a few weeks or months or whatever, that we're not actually finding any benefits. We're not getting any neurological, cardiovascular, or strength benefits from that stimulus anymore. That is a plateau, and you can actually decline as well. So the feelings that you were having, the size of your muscles, the strength that you were showing is actually getting worse, okay? Or your heart rate is getting faster at rest, or you're finding it harder to walk the dog than you did before. All those things are declines, and you can actually have that happen when you're not doing the right exercise for you. Okay, so just understand we have overload, plateau, and declines when it comes to training. Okay, and I'll give a couple of examples when I go into the phases of adaptation. So remember, adaptation is when our cardiovascular system or our neurological or our muscular system are all together start to show improvements because our body is adapting to a stress that we're applying to it, okay? So the first phase of adaptation is called the alarm or the reaction phase, and that is basically when a new stimulus exceeds your current capacity. Okay, so it will cause muscle soreness, fatigue, decreased performance or ability to do your day-to-day things, and then the body, because of that, goes into its own repair process. It initiates a process of repair where it says, okay, muscle fibers, um, you know, they're partially torn, repair back together at a micro level, okay? Cardiovascular system, you need to learn to take in more oxygen per beat, okay, and pump more blood out per beat to be able to do that again. So there's a series of repairs going on in the body when you're in the alarm reaction phase. And it's that time where you feel like, you know, you have done maybe a gym class or you've gone for the first run in a long time or bike ride, and the next day or the day after, you're really sore and heavy and you just could not do that again, and you actually find it hard to do your normal things, you know, like to get down and up and down from sitting and things like that is hard. That is that alarm reaction phase, okay? And I had a friend tell me yesterday she did her first F45 class, like a group class at a gym this past week, and she'd signed up for 3 classes a week, but she couldn't do any more this week because she was so sore from the first class. So she's in that alarm reaction phase, okay? And it was probably a bit too much, you know? So we want to make sure that your alarm reaction phase doesn't go for days on end. It should only be a maximum of 2 days, really, and then you feel like you could do it again. So if you are feeling like it lasts more than 2 days, you need to not do that much in your next session and reduce it back, okay? So the second phase is that resistance or development phase. And this is when the body has adapted to the initial stimulus, okay, or the stressor that you've applied to it, and it starts to show an improvement in your performance and fitness. So there's an increase in strength, endurance, skill development, if it's for sport, and a decrease in fatigue. All right, so you'll start to notice that each session you do, if it was the same sort of, say, that group session, it's easier to do each time. And in your other activities, you know, if you play netball or go swimming or surfing or go for a run with your dog or whatever, that they're all starting to feel easier, you know, than they used to feel to do that same thing, okay? Or it might be that you're, you know, training your arms more and you're finding that when you're hanging washing on the line or carrying grocery bags, things like that, it's all just feeling more, it's easier to do, okay? So that's the development phase. So, and this can be neurological as well. So it can be things like when people are at risk of falling over in the elderly, they're not feeling like they have to hold on to things as much to stabilize themselves, or they're not falling over as much and things like that, okay? So the third phase is supercompensation phase, okay? And that's basically you're feeling like you're reaching your optimal fitness from the current stimulus or stress that you're applying, and that's showing through your performance and your overall energy levels, okay? So it's also showing up in your strength gains, and it's when it's time to continue to train, but you need to initiate a new challenge on the body, okay, for it to continue to adapt and keep working on that fitness, okay, to keep improving and increasing your performance goals. If you don't change anything and you keep doing that same routine, you will actually plateau. And then if you keep just plateauing, eventually you'll decrease in your fitness. And I'll give an example is my mother. She's retired for a long time now, but she worked for a really long time in an office job in the city. And her building, she worked on, I think it was the 6th floor or the 5th floor in the city. And she walked, you know, she got the train and everything and walked quite a lot to from the train stations to her work, but then she always walked up the stairs to get to her department. And I remember her saying to me, "Oh, I walk up the stairs every day, at work, 2 to 3 times a day, when she goes on her lunch break, then she has to do it again and things like that. So I'm fit because I do these stairs." But if you do that for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you've definitely plateaued because it's the same amount of stairs, it's the same amount that you're doing of those sets of stairs, the same 5 days a week, week in, week out. So she would have at the start, in the first 6 weeks, got fitter doing that, but then she would have just plateaued and then declined in her fitness because her body was ready to be given something new to work towards. And so, in the end, she definitely wasn't that fit. She's had hip replacements and things like that, and low muscle mass, and that's because she never worked on improving that and making it harder. So that's just an example. Okay, so just recapping on the phases of adaptation, you've got alarm reaction phase, which is that new stimulus, you're feeling sore, it's quite a shock to your body, you're feeling fatigued from it after, okay, and your body really is going into a state of healing and repair and learning the processes of how it can repair for you. And as you train and get more used to training, your body becomes more efficient at repairing as well, okay? And sometimes you'll hear the term, "Oh, you've got good muscle memory," and that's usually someone that might have had a big break from training but used to train a lot. Maybe they were an athlete, when they were younger, or they've had some time off training because they've been injured. They actually do recover and make gains quicker than someone that's never trained before because their body remembers what it has to do. So the second phase is the resistance or development phase, and that's when the body has adapted to that initial stimulus, okay, and it is showing improvement in performance and fitness, okay. So there's an increase in the strength, endurance, skill development, and that fatigue's not really an issue. So they're in a pretty good spot at that point. And then super compensation is when it's time to pick up the pace, like add some new challenges to your training program because you don't want to decline. It's okay to have a bit of a plateau phase, but then you want to push it up again as opposed to letting your body drop in fitness. So there's 3 phases of adaptation, okay? And then your next question, out loud while I'm saying this is, well, how do I know how to do this? What do I do? And that's where periodization comes into it. And that's learning how to overload enough without the exercise being too much. So if we go back to that friend that did the F45 class and then couldn't move for the rest of the week, well, her overload was too much. And she didn't know because she hadn't done any strength tests on herself, or she didn't know where her cardiovascular system was, which is why it is a good thing to have someone like me, do some baseline tests on you first so that you know what level you're at and how and where to start from, okay? And we've been doing that in your program already, so well done. So periodization is then the key to not allowing injuries and things like chronic fatigue and stuff like that to happen because you're not overloading the body too much where it shuts down, okay? It's just small stimulus, small stresses that's enough for the body to take on and then recover. And you will notice I talked about that and the theory of hormesis in the Aging Well the Aging Well workshop, which was the one before this one, I think. And there's lots of things in the workshops you've already been listening to that will start to come into your mind now that I'm talking about this, because you'll remember, what are good ways to recover when the body's in the recovery phase. And we've talked about cold water immersion and saunas or heat therapy and what to eat when you're in recovery and things like that. So You also have in your downloads today a sleep article that I've done with a friend that was in a magazine that's great for you to read to just recap on where your sleep is. And also the big thing that is uploaded in today's workshop is my workshop manual, which is like all the 3 ebooks that you've got on this program, but in one big manual with spaces for you to write heaps of notes next to each exercise. And at the back is a chart of how to fill out your exercises and progress along and see how you're progressing. Okay, so it's just an idea for you to use. Some people will do it a different way. Men, it's been shown that men adhere to exercise better when they're using tech. So they like to, use apps on their phones and things like that. So if that works for you, that's great. Women prefer to just keep it simple. And personally, myself, I just have a little book and I just have it in my gym and I leave it there and I just write down what I do each day. And that works for me, because I can compare back to the day or the week before when I did that exercise and make sure I'm always doing the same or a little bit more, okay? So that's periodization, okay? So making sure that our planning is enough to stimulate our body without it being too much or too little, okay? So it always should be the same or more than what you've previously done on that exercise. And that comes down to 4 components, and we only change one component or variable with our training at a time. So this is where you might want to write this down. In terms of periodizing our training, we use a principle called the FITT Principle, okay? And the FITT Principle is FITT, and it stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type. And it is an age-old principle that has been used for decades in sports training, okay? And when you are creating a program, you're wanting to go into a super compensation phase, so increase it to make it harder somehow so you don't decline in your training and you don't stay in a plateau for too long, this is when you use FITT. So the first F, the first variable in FITT, in the FITT principle, is frequency, and that comes down to how often you're doing the training, okay? So for instance, my mum did those stairs 5 days a week, twice a day, say, okay? So she could have, when she plateaued, when her strength tests weren't improving anymore and she didn't feel fatigued from it at all, then what we needed to do was change it somehow. And we could have changed it to her doing more than twice a day on those 5 days a week, or we could have added a 6th day, and that is changing the frequency of her training. My friend that did the F45 class, her aim is to be able to do more sessions. So the class will be exactly the same, but instead of doing once a week, she'll do 2 times a week. And then maybe when she gets used to that, she'll move to 3 times a week. So that is frequency. This can also come down to sessions within a day as well. So someone might be doing a small, set of exercises just once a day, and they may move that to being twice and then 3 times a day. Okay, so that is frequency. And so if you change the frequency, you don't change anything else. And I usually focus on a 4 to 5 week bout. So if that's what you're changing, then that stays like that for 4 to 5 weeks, which is what allows adaptation to occur. If we're talking about a whole program of exercises here, okay? And then I'll have what's called a recovery week, which is that plateau week usually, and let the body just, do its own thing, have a rest from everything, and then start super compensation on the 7th week, which is basically week 1 again of the next cycle of training, okay, with a new variable. So the I in the FITT principle is for intensity. So if we talked about intensity, we're talking about the effort you're giving in terms of how much cardiac output you're giving. So making your heart work a bit harder, so your heart rate is higher. So an example would be with my mum and the stairs. Instead of increasing her frequency to 3 times a day or an extra day a week, she could try and go faster up the stairs. Okay, so beat her time, increase her effort to get up those stairs quicker. That's an example of intensity. If someone's doing a training for a 5K run, that 5 kilometers stays the same, but they may try and increase their intensity by the last 100 meters going a bit harder, okay? And then that over a few weeks, they might then, over the last 200 meters, go a bit harder. So that's working on the intensity. The next one is time. So you may run for longer. You may not be focusing on distance so much, but just instead of being on the treadmill at the gym for 20 minutes at level 7, you may decide to do 25 minutes at level 7 every session. That's just an example. So having more time, this usually relates to cardiovascular training or endurance training, but it can relate to strength training in terms of the slowness of a press, okay, and then the tempo. So it might be quick up, slow down, or slow up, quicker down, okay? So time and tempo can be in the same category. And then the very last one, the last variable for the FITT principle is type. So changing the type of exercise that you do. So if you're focusing on strengthening your legs, you may have been doing just squats, you may do squats and lunges, or you may change the type of the squat to what you're doing. You may do a completely different leg exercise. You may be training your cardiovascular system and you've been swimming. You might change to, a couple of times a week, or just totally change to doing bike riding. I have a client at the moment that loves running, but she probably overloaded too much and didn't have the recovery and went a bit hard and got a slight injury from running, so she's changed to cycling, okay? So that's type. So just literally changing up your exercises. Some people are really into doing cardio all the time and love that, and then they're just finding they can't really go any further. They can't add more days or sessions, and so they might start adding in some strength training to completely shock the body and have a new stimulus for that super compensation phase. Okay, so that is the FITT principle: frequency, intensity, time, and type. So you already know, if you've done sessions with me, of where to start, and I've given you usually your exercises by now and what to work on. But this allows you to really start to build on that program and integrate new things, integrate your aerobic cardiovascular training, and start to track it, know where you're at, how you feel, and when you're ready to go into that super compensation phase to start making it harder, okay? So I hope that has given you a lot to think about, and it's a shorter workshop, but it's a very integral workshop, because really my workshops do go for around an hour, but now that you've listened to this, I really want you to go to that manual that you can download. Please try and print it out if you can, or at least print out the end section where I give all the exercises in lists and then how to fill them out as you go along, so that you've got that and you can fill it out and maybe have it in the area where you train. And you can add in, you might make your own spreadsheet up or get your own little diary like I have, and write down all the exercises that you're doing, all the sort of training you're doing, if it's, walking and then you're aiming to go to running. So just write it all out and have a bit of a plan of how you want to fill out your sessions each week. And that is key. You will not get improvements if you're not logging your training, okay? I promise you won't. And by logging your training, it gives you a little hit of dopamine that you are improving, and that's really important. If you're not someone like me that just loves exercise, you have to find what excites you about the exercise. And for most people, it's seeing improvements and also seeing that you've stuck to something and that you're gaining and are developing, okay? So it's really important to not try and find motivation by focusing at your end goal. People that stick to fitness routines are not focusing on feeling good at the end goal, at doing that 5Ks in 20 or 25 minutes. People that stick to exercise routines in the long term throughout their whole life cycle are ones that get the dopamine hit from the everyday training. They feel good in the moment of doing the training. And my aim for you is that by listening to all these workshops, you're understanding how good exercise and good nutrition is for your body, and you deserve to have that, okay? So by understanding why it's so good for you, every time you make a healthy food choice, or you go and do a little bit of exercise, or you push yourself a bit more than before, that should make you feel good inside and get a little rush of dopamine, okay? And a little bit of adrenaline also can help that dopamine rush as well. So whether it's getting on some cardio and getting your heart rate up, that gives you the dopamine hit, but also because adrenaline and dopamine sort of work together, but then also just being stoked at looking how many sessions you've done in the last week or month, or how your improvements in the last week from the week before in your strength, that gives you a little bit of a dopamine hit too. And then adrenaline comes along and you feel more energized in your day because of that. So in terms of how our brain works, it's really important to try and shift why you're doing the exercise. And I really want you to think about all of the good things you're learning of why exercise and nutrition is good for us and how it can affect us in positive ways, and really start to absorb that feeling instead of worrying about the long-term goal, okay? Because it's shown that, you know what, once someone reaches that goal, they do that fun run or whatever, if they've just been focusing on getting that rush from that fun run, it's very unlikely they're going to keep training the next week. And they're the sort of people that usually need a mate that drags them along every day to training, and you shouldn't rely on someone else to work on your health and fitness. It needs to come from you and you wanting to do it. So I hope that makes a bit of sense as well. Your final workshop is going to go a lot into your deeper reasons and your goals moving forward in life, and how your health and fitness is going to assist them as well, okay? So I hope this workshop's been valuable to you. Again, I love your feedback, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.